Hey everyone, it's Jessie from b.a.r.e Flower Farm. It's September 10th and transplanting is on the agenda for today amongst other things. But I thought I would do a video on basically what I am doing to overwinter. So even though I am planting things that technically are cool weather crops that can be grown the fall, if I get a flush for fall, that is great. But the priority is to really get started on the spring season. And a part of it is just I anticipate on having a really busy late winter, early spring. But the other part of it is just who wants to be out there transplanting, waiting for the soil to thaw in late March, early April. In fact, this year, realistically, I wouldn't have been able to plant anything until April anyway. And at that point, you know, our springs here, at least in New Jersey, are not long enough for the cool flowers to really, I feel, hit their stride in a way that they could if you had overwintered them. So there's some seedlings in the back. I'm going to show you exactly what I have. I'm going to show you what I have in the field, and we'll talk a little bit about just why I chose to plant what I'm planting and some other plants that I have. So the good news is that I do have some empty trays, and those are the ones that are already in the field. So let's talk about what's over here. I've got my last tray of Snapdragons. I actually had 3 full trays. These are trays of 72. We had some like Maryland in there, like I think a lavender, cool twist variety. And I can't remember the third one, but there were 72 times 3. So, you know, over 210 plants. This here is lupine or lupine, however you call it. This will actually hopefully go in our landscaping area over there, which has been overtaken by weeds. We were actually supposed to do that last weekend, but my husband had a really nasty fall and was out of commission, and he was going to help de-weed that area. But so this will be the last tray that will likely get planted in. And I think I had some deer come in and nibble on this. Chance, can you just be patient, please? He wants me to throw the ball for him. Give me a second. Anyway, so going back to the seedlings, Rudbeckia. This is ruby and gold Rudbeckia. So, you know, I think from just a root development perspective, obviously these are ready to go in, but I'm considering putting some of them also in the landscaping because they tend to be pretty deer resistant, although the deer have been eating everything this year. Sweet William. This is my second tray of Sweet William. I gave some Sweet William away to a local grower, but again, you know, the root systems are pretty good here. So this will definitely be going in today. One thing to note about the Sweet William is that, you know, these will get pretty, I think, big, and I'm spacing them pretty closely with each other. So we'll see what happens. But I had 2 trays of this. 1 tray is already in. Next is Feverfew. This really needs to go in. It's already getting a little bit lighter in leaf color. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell on this camera, but this was like a really deep green before. So we have 2 trays of Feverfew here. There's 2 different varieties. I'm honestly not sure which varieties these are, but I had a 3rd tray that was just bursting at the seams. So that went in pretty quickly. That's already in the field. This is Verbescum. It is a perennial that I believe is typically grown in England. So a lot of people here don't really know about it. So my local grower friend basically, you know, showed me a photo. I was like, yeah, of course, I'll definitely want to grow it. And then this is yarrow. So you can see we only have, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4 times 6, like 25 or 24 plants left. So these actually went in pretty early, about like 2.5 weeks ago. So we're looking at roughly 6-ish trays that still need to get in. These trays were started by my local grower friend, and she started them back in like mid-July. So she seeded them in July. She pricked them out of the soil, put them into these 72 cell trays, and basically gave them to me Friday of last week. So I spent last weekend trying to get as much in as possible. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but it's taking me a really long time to plant because of how clay our soil is and how dry it was. So the rain that we got last week that was around like 1.5 inches has really helped in terms of even just loosening up the soil. But I did buy an auger attachment for my power drill. So I will be using that because my wrist was on fire last week trying to dig. I know a lot of people use like a butter knife to basically just slide the seedling in. I am not at that phase yet with my soil. It is just too hard for me to do that. In fact, it is not only so hard, it is also really, really dry. So I have to do kind of like that tree planting method where I dig a small hole, I water it, and then I put the plug in, and then I water again, and then I basically, you know, put soil over it. So that is the only way that I found to be able to keep my seedlings alive in this drought that we've had in New Jersey this season. All right, so let's get started with what is in the field. You can see over here, I have a bunch of Snapdragons. And this was an original Snapdragon bed. There's some posts over here. There's some netting in the back that you can see that still needs to be put up. I'm still a little bit in between whether or not I want to keep the netting here. This year, you know, we didn't have a lot of storms, so it didn't fully make sense, but I've seen Nicole from Flower Hill Farm not net and it's fine. So I'm still deciding, but normally I wouldn't put the same crop twice in a row. It was because the infrastructure for netting was here that I decided to put it in. Now I did amend this area with some chicken poop compost, and this is compost that my neighbor down in the back all the way over there he makes. So he has about like 120 something chickens. He's an avid gardener. He makes way more compost than he needs and he likes to share. But what he also does is he'll actually get some grape skins from a local vineyard, mix it in there, and he composts this stuff for like, you know, 2-3 years. So he's got 3 piles and he will rotate the piles. So he was able to bring a bucket of or actually 2 buckets worth of his compost for me with his tractor. And I'm obviously very grateful for it because the chicken poop manure is gold when it comes to providing nutrients and helping with the soil life. So I'm pretty excited to see what magic it can do here. But yeah, you can tell that I've got quite a bit of Snapdragons here. Some of this stuff in the front is actually stuff that was from my first succession of Snapdragons. So these were plugs that I bought from Farmer Bailey's. The problem with buying plugs from him is that you obviously have to buy in a full tray. So for Snapdragons, that's like 216 billed as 210. But unless if they offer a mixed variety and they're not out, you have to buy the same color. So for whatever reason, with my husband's influence, I bought Potomac Apple Blossom, which is a white with like a pink, you know, hue. And then I bought Ivory Madame Butterfly and it was just too much white. So I ended up ripping out most of it after the first succession was done. And then I did get a second succession in from, I bought plugs. This was back in July, so they went in. You can see all the way in the back. I'll show you a little bit later, but those are starting to bloom. So when in mid-July, started blooming in late August. They're not at their prime yet, and I think they will be at their prime in about a week. And then my third succession of Snapdragons is here in the ground, as well as the tray that you saw before. Now, I will preface by saying that Snapdragons are obviously cool weather crops. You know, they can tolerate frost. But the intention here, again, is not necessarily to get a fall bloom. This is for overwintering for the spring so that I can get a head start on spring. And if I get some blooms here, that would be, you know, that'd be a bonus, right? But the Snapdragons that I did prioritize getting in were the ones that were a little bit taller. So I'm trying to actually find where they are right now. They're kind of, they're over here, and it's kind of hard to tell just by looking at it from top down. I'll take a photo after to show you the growth that it's already put on. But those were Snapdragons that were pretty tall. They're already pinched. I was like, these just need to go in. So they went in. In between the Snapdragons here, there's some here and there's more there. We actually have Canterbury bells. So these are the Champion 2 series, I believe, which, you know, Canterbury bells and Foxglove are biannual. So typically when you plant them the first year, they're not going to flower until the next year. Now these happen to be hybrids. So the Foxgloves that I got and the Canterbury bells that I got are hybrids that are technically treated as annuals. Now that being said, they do a lot better when they get that cooling period to overwinter. And my understanding of a biannual is that, you know, it's not like they need 2 full years in order to flower. They really need that cooling period. And then, you know, the hot warm period or warm period to be able to initiate flowering. So the way that I spaced these, you can see they're actually pretty close to each each other. They're spaced about, like, I would say 4 to 5 inches apart. I would expect to get single stems off of these. If you space them a little bit further apart, like 8 inches, you may get multiple stems, but I am treating this kind of as just like a one and done. So we'll see if I come to regret that later. But moving on here, you can see that there are more Snapdragons in the back. There's some of the Madame Butterfly Ivory that I didn't take out. And then by the netting over here is the crop that I put in back in July. And you can see that some of those Madame Butterfly are finally starting to bloom. Next up, I want to show you some stuff that I started doing. This is about 3 weeks ago. So you can see I have some sunflowers here. I have a lot of sunflowers here. Most of them are cut and done. Some of them just blew open. I had a really busy work week, and I mean, you know, Thursday I was gone from like 7:30 and didn't come back till basically like 9 p.m. I did have dinner, so like with work people. So it's just one of those things where, you know, you miss sunflowers and they blow open and you're done. And I was very meticulous on Tuesday looking for blooms that could be stored in the fridge, and they just weren't ready. And I didn't have a chance to go out on Wednesday because I was also, you know, really busy with work. And then, you know, Thursday comes around and yeah, like they're done. So it's fine. They'll be there for the pollinators. But what I want to show you is basically intercropping with the expectation that you're going to rip out stuff to be able to, you know, grow other things in here, right? So here I actually have some yarrow. So you can see over here, this is yarrow that I put in about 3 weeks ago. And the intention of this was knowing that this yarrow wasn't hardened off yet properly. So everything I showed you before has been hardened off. And, you know, I would say they're about a week overdue being in the ground, but the yarrow was not. And I was afraid that it would die if I just planted out in straight sun. So I planted it in between the sunflowers where it would be a little off for shade. And then now when I come to clear the sunflowers, I will have some yarrow ready in here. Now, I basically replicated this with some other stuff that I started from seed, such as stock. So let me show you. If we walk all the way back over here, it's kind of hard to tell, but there is some stock in the middle here. And let's go this way. They're not exactly the biggest seedlings, but it is an experiment to see if I can get some fall stock. I have this thing with stock where I know it's foolish to try to grow it in this climate, but I just want one season of successful stock, and then I can move on with my life and never grow stock again. But speaking of stock, I do want to show you something else. Back in April, when I got the Snapdragon plugs, I also got some column stock plugs from Farmer Bailey's. And I would say that, you know, I timed it wrong. But at the same time, the day after I got the plugs, it was 28 degrees at night. And so the stock at that stage is just too fragile to go into the ground without some significant covering. So I waited for a few more days when it was safely above frost, and then I put them in the ground, and this is what they look like right now. They are still alive. And the problem is they never flowered because it got too warm. So in order for stock to start flowering, the nighttime temperatures need to be consistently below 50 degrees. By the time they were ready to flower, we were getting temperatures at night, you know, in the in the 60s. Actually, I think the stock needs to be below 60 degrees at night to flower, but preferably in like the low 50s. And by the time, you know, they were ready to flower, we were getting like mid 60s at night. So suffice to say, they never flowered. But I really wanted a crop of stock. So I showed in one of my other videos, I started planting sunflowers. So here are some sunflowers. And the reason why I never took out these sunflowers is because I wanted them to continuously provide shade to the stock. So it's worked so far in the sense that the stock actually haven't died. So I am holding out for the stock to actually give me a crop sometime the next month or two. What's really cool is that some of the stock has actually started putting on some more leaf growth. So I feel like that they're hanging in there, and I do have a chance at getting stock. All right, so I started running out of prepped bed space. So, and then I also wanted to just see, you know, if you planted some stuff in different parts of the field, how they would do. So there is some more yarrow over here. Let me show you. my camera keeps on getting stuck on the string for the tomatoes over here. But here's some foxglove. So even though this bed was not fully ready, it was actually onions in here. So the onions, because this was like a vegetable row, this is pretty rich in terms of compost and stuff. I wanted to put the foxglove in here. So eventually the tomatoes will get ripped out. And then, you know, it will just be the foxglove. But, you know, this is kind of how you make it work, right? I think that interplanting is also just like one of those concepts that is underutilized, especially in flower farming. So it's not the most tidy, but, you know, the foxglove got in, and I think that the soil will, you know, hopefully help it, because foxglove does need some level of nutrition. I do have some more foxglove also in this bed over here. So you can see that this is about 70 foxgloves in the ground. Next up, we've got sea holly. So this is the bed of sea holly. What I found fascinating from a cost and just, like a cost perspective, is that when you go on Farmer Bailey's and you look at the cost of different seedlings, this is the most expensive out of the ones that I was growing. Sea holly by far for a tray was more expensive, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about cost later, you know, how much I paid for this, how much I thought was fair, that kind of stuff. But, you know, with sea holly, they are perennial, so you would expect them to come back year after year, but they are also spaced pretty far apart. So they take up quite a bit of real estate, but you know, who doesn't love sea holly in their bouquets? So I thought it was a very worthy investment. These were also among the first to go in. I think they were the very first plant that went in, because I grabbed the seedlings from my local grower in 2 different phases. And so some of them were not fully hardened off, but they bounced back. So, you know, at the end of the day, as long as they have like a strong root system, I always feel like that you have a higher chance of them coming back than them completely dying, unless if, you know, they're not getting the proper water and all that stuff. So I made sure that this bed was actually watered consistently for the first week when they went in. Next up, we have another mixed bed, because I ran out of space and time to prep the bed. So, you know, in my view, getting them in, and it might not be perfect, is better than not getting them in. So I've got feverfew in the ground over here. This feverfew is the feverfew that I am holding out for a potential blush or flush this fall. Now, the thing with the feverfew is that you can see that as we get further back over here, it's actually a bit interplanted. And it's interplanted, actually it's back over here where it's interplanted. It's interplanted between asters. So I took a risk on asters. I started my own from seed, and then I also bought some from plugs. And this was, you know, they went in the ground in July, so that is really late for aster, but I just wanted to see what would happen. So, you know, I got flowers. They're really piddly. I mean, I'll show you a photo. It's kind of funny, but they would be pretty cute for mason jar bouquets. And I will have some tiny mason jar bouquets made for my friend's baby shower next week, so I actually see a use for them. But I also know I'm not going to get a lot of flowers out of them. So I was like, it is safe to interplant my feverfew between. So this is what I did. So you can see that this is an aster over here, but there's feverfew. I would expect this aster to come out in about, you know, a few weeks or whatever, and then the feverfew can basically take off. So I did a lot of, how do you say, like patch planting. So for example, there's celosia over here, which did really, really well. There's celosia in other parts where some also did really well, some didn't do as well. And some of it was just, you know, the level of moisture in the soil when it went into transplant. So for example, you know, my house is over there. Our hose bib is still down there. So when I do water, I'm dragging the hose bib out here. And so obviously, because this is closer to the house, this area gets more water than that area down there. And I've also just been very intentional about not over watering, because we all have well water around here. We all share an aquifer. There was a drought. So I think that the plants here did a lot better because I basically watered it a little bit more than the plants out there, right? So that's also just, you know, like at the end of the day, your farm, even though this is like in the same part of the backyard, there's a little bit of a slope from here all the way down there, which means that when it rains heavily, the water is technically running downhill. So you would expect certain areas to retain higher moisture than other parts. And, you know, normally, you know, it may not matter unless if it's like on an extreme where it's very dry or it's very wet. So I think that, you know, separating out your seedlings is actually a good test and a good insurance policy in case of you hit those types of weather extremes. Last but not least, we have some Sweet William here. Now, this was in a row where there were just a row of zinnias, and this was one of the most disappointing rows, honestly. You could say that my stock row where the sunflowers are and I never got stock was disappointing. At least that one still has some hope. The zinnias here got overtaken by powdery mildew very quickly. Now, I was kind of surprised because I thought that powdery mildew did well in wet, humid environments, and we obviously had a very dry summer. But then I did some research and I learned that powdery mildew actually does even better when it's dry and humid. So it was the perfect type of weather for powdery mildew. I think that as I continue to build up soil health, it will help counter that, but you know, it was a lost cause season. So I really didn't get as many blooms as I should have given how many flowers I grew there. But, you know, I cleared it all out and then I was able to get some Sweet William in there. This one does not have a lot of chicken compost in there. So that is actually a plan after when I get all the transplants in to put in the chicken poop compost. You know, part of the motivation for me wanting to get the seedlings in so quickly was that we had significant rain last week. So I wanted to make sure that the seedlings could get in. And then we are expecting rain for the next couple of days too. So that's also why I'm in a rush today to get as many in as possible. But you know, the Sweet William here look pretty good. They were giant. I mean, they grew like gangbusters. I'll show you a photo of what the tray looked like over here underneath with the root system. So they transplanted pretty well. And you know, the goal today is to really prepare the beds. So you know, I do have some cleanup over here, but I have a lot of cleanup elsewhere with the sunflowers over here. I mean, this is a giant grown zucchini. That has been like a very impressive zucchini because it has not been overcome by powdery mildew. So I'm saving seed from that zucchini. We've gotten at least, I would say, 30 zucchini off of that one plant alone, and it's still going strong. But yeah, like I need to really rip out some of the vegetables and just start turning the beds and getting them ready. So got a full day of work ahead of us, but I will show you a part of the process in terms of me transplanting, and then we'll talk a little bit about the financials and why I didn't choose to start from seed for all of this stuff. So yeah, we'll pick up from there. You still want more fetch, huh? So you just saw me use the auger in this soil over here. I would say that I'm having mostly positive results with the auger. This is actually soil that I feel like is the easiest to dig overall for two reasons. One, I mentioned that even within this relatively flat piece of field, this is the most downward sloping part of the field. So when it rains, especially heavily in the spring, a lot of water will end up accumulating here. But then the second piece is I did amend it with the chicken compost about 2.5 months ago, and you can really see a difference in the soil color even when you're digging. So the auger works really well here. I don't need a supplement with hand digging. Over here where I just planted some Sweet William, you know, just literally like 4 feet away, it was a little bit of a different story. I had to supplement a little bit with hand digging, but let me tell you, like, just getting started with the hole is just such a game changer, and it's made it so much faster to transplant than last week. So I have high hopes that I can actually get most of the transplants into the ground. I recruited help. I think that one was closed, honey. The one that you just chopped down. It's okay. There you go. perfect. Whoa, look at that root. So it's 1:30 right now. In the span of an hour and a half, I've gotten probably almost twice as much done as what I would have gotten done last Monday at this time. And a part of it is because this guy over here is really helping. He helped me get rid of all the sunflowers. So this is a bed full of sunflowers. Before, he got rid of all of them. He left a few open here just for the pollinators, but this will allow me to prep this bed to get more transplants in. He got rid of a bunch of other sunflowers, helped me wheelbarrow in some compost. So I got 2 trays in already, 1 tray of Sweet William, 1 tray of Feverfew that you just saw over here. That auger, man, like just lifesaver. So I'm pretty happy with where I am right now, and so is he while stepping on my yarrow seedling. Chance? Let's talk about cost now. I mentioned earlier that my local grower friend started all of these from seed sometime in mid to late July, and we are in, we're basically in mid-September right now, right? So if you think about it, that is 2 full months of getting these babies ready for the field. Now I am in zone 6B. First expected frost is around mid-October. Last year we didn't get one until it was basically Thanksgiving here in New Jersey. So that was a very late frost. But for the most part, we're looking at trying to get these seedlings in 6 to 8 weeks before frost. And that's to really allow them time to settle in from the transplant, allow them to grow their root systems out a bit, a little bit more greenery. But obviously the intent is less about getting flowers and more about getting them situated for the cold winter that is going to be ahead. So I say that because July was really hot. It was really busy. I am someone who can start stuff from seed if it's the dead of winter. There's really not much else to do. Especially if I'm working from home, it makes it a lot easier for me to start from seed. I've started going back to work 3 times a week. And it's just one of those things where if this were up to me, I might have 200 seedlings if I'm lucky. But for the most part, I would certainly not have this level of variety and volume. So when I did the math in terms of how many seedlings I bought from my friend Jess, I bought over 1,000 seedlings, 1,044 to be exact. Now, take out, let's just say 100 for, some of them may not have completely done well in the tray. Some of them are not going to transplant well outside. So, we're still looking at like 900 seedlings, which is a lot of seedlings. And the other thing was that Jess helped me prioritize which ones could be perennials, which ones could give me multiple flushes after various seasons, right? So, we're looking at the Feverfew. There's 3 trays of them. The Verbescum is definitely a perennial. The which ones else are there? The Sea Holly is a really good example. So there was both the knowledge and also the act of growing the seeds that really I was paying for. And then the other piece is if I'm buying from plugs from Farmer Bailey's, I have to buy in mass quantities. So with these, I was able to get them for $72 for each type of variety or type of flower. So all of this comes out to $474. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to that math. Now, I said to Jess, instead of buying from Farmer Bailey's, I'll just buy from you. I'd rather buy a little bit more local. And I don't know if people are aware of this, but obviously someone like a Farmer Bailey's is working through another grower. So he works through grow and sell. And they are essentially a large greenhouse operation. There's a lot of stuff that happens in a greenhouse. There's viruses, there's pest pressure, there's a lot of spraying going on, right? And as someone who really started this local flower farm trying to get away from that, that was one of those things that was really difficult for me to overcome, knowing that I needed seedlings. I may not have been able to do it on my own, but I was also paying for a product that was being sprayed. So it was a huge benefit for me to know that, Jess is growing at a small enough scale where I know she's not doing that. And I've seen how she grows, and she cares very much about growing organically and sustainably. So not only did I get more variety, ability to customize my quantity in smaller amounts, and have it grown organically in bigger plug cells, I thought that all of this really equated to a premium. So what I did was I went onto Farmer Bailey's site and I looked at all of the seedlings that he offered, and I basically looked at what was it that he charged per plug. So to give you an example here, something like a Snapdragon tends to run on the lower end of price. So a single Snapdragon is really around like 20 cents per plug on Farmer Bailey's. But something like sea holly that I mentioned earlier, which is way more expensive, is actually about 3 times that amount. It is 64 cents a plug. And that is the highest end in terms of what you're paying. And my speculation is that it is a perennial. The seeds sometimes aren't as easy to get. Like, I don't know if that contributed to an increase, but regardless, the sea holly is the highest end. So you have basically a lot of things averaging out in the 30 to 40 cent range. So to give you another example, the Foxgloves were priced at 50 cents. The Sweet William was more on the 25, 26 cent side, right? So there's variability in how it was priced. But what I did was I took that per price plug that I calculated from Farmer Bailey's, and then I added a 20% premium because Jess was growing organically. And then I multiplied it basically by 72, which is what she had grown for me for most varieties. So that's how I got the price per tray. And so the sea holly tray of 72 cost $55.30. A Snapdragon tray cost just under $20 at $19.75 or $19.83. He wants a belly rub right now. So all this to say, a tray went anywhere from, we'll call it $20 to $55, which I think is really fair because, someone is spending 2 months of their time not only just growing from seed, but babysitting it, obviously, giving it enough water to make sure it's flourishing, plucking the little seedlings out of the original tray into the cells. And then even more importantly, she is helping me harden off. I find hardening off as one of the hardest processes because I'll forget that they're outside. And now that I am going back to the office, it really does make it difficult for me to get it out and then back in at a certain time. It doesn't work if I'm going in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I can harden off properly on Monday, but not on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? So I'm just saying that this works for me because I think a lot of people look at $475 and they're like, there's no way that I could be paying for this and growing from seed. But I look at the opportunity cost of not paying that $475. The opportunity cost is I'm not going to have much for spring, right? Right now I feel maybe about 2/3 of my field really tucked in and ready for spring. And I feel good about spring, assuming that these guys can survive. So it's just one of those things where, if you know your weaknesses, if you know what you don't like to do, these are the things in my view that are worth spending money on. These are the costs that I don't want to compromise on. I'd rather cut back in other areas because remember, even though I'm spending $475 for these seedlings, I'm going to get a bigger return. Now the return is not going to be as much as if I started from seed, but at the end of the day, I'm probably only saving about, I would say, $200 max. So think about the seeds that you have to buy, right? I was on GeoSeeds. They have a minimum quantity before you have to pay a handling fee, right? And that handling fee is not a lot of money, but it is still money. And psychologically, I say to myself, I have to buy a lot of seeds. So I actually had started the process of looking at what seeds I was going to buy from GeoSeeds. And I was buying stuff that I really was not going to grow. And so like, it's just one of those things where I would have overshot for seeds, right? So let's just say that my seed order would have been like $100, even though the seed order for this was clearly going to be less than $100. But then the time and everything involved, right? Like just the time alone, I think would have cost about like $125, $150 to do all of this. So, you know, that brings me to, let's just say $250, right? I'm paying $475. So for spending an extra $225, $250 to get all of this, it's totally worth it because, you know, it gives me a peace of mind. And I feel like I have enough variety to be able to have some level of spring blooms and bouquets for the following season. So it is not too late for a lot of you to direct seed. If you are in zone 6 or 7, you know, I think you still have some time, especially if you're going to direct seed. It might be a little bit late to start from seed to transplant, because remember, when you transplant, it does take at least a week or two for those transplants to get used to their environment. But if you are in a higher zone, meaning like zone 8, zone 9, you definitely have time to do this. And, you know, those are the zones where like someone like Lisa Mason Ziegler really says that overwintering for early spring is the way to go, because you guys really don't have that kind of spring that you need, right? So you kind of do need that head start. And then folks in the lower zones, I would say that, you know, we typically have a little bit more of leeway. I feel like zone 6 falls a little bit in between the both of those, but you know, there's a bunch of stuff here that is really hardy down to zone 6, zone 5. So overwintering cool hardy annuals can be done in a lot of these zones. I would say that, you know, down to zone 4 is probably where, you know, you're going to be able to find stuff. Zone 3, it's going to start getting a little bit harder. So for most of us, there's still an opportunity to do this. Don't let this slip by if it is a priority for you to get early spring blooms. So leave me a note in the comments if you have any questions or if you have any feedback for me, and I'll see you next time.